Rebecca Carter, Random House Editor-at-Large, welcome to the London Book Fair podcast. First of all, tell us about your career. What was your path to this job, which is very much about translated fiction and non-fiction, isn't it?
Well, I always wanted to be an editor who dealt with both English language things and books in translation, but it was quite difficult to get a step on the ladder in an editorial job when I was first out of university. I spent a year in Italy teaching English, and so I had an interest in publishing books in foreign languages. But so I wrote letters, went to see various editors. One of them said, take this line about being interested in foreign books out of your letter, no one will ever offer you a job. The other man was Christopher MacLehose, who of course ran Harvill Press. It was just at the time. Yes. They'd just had a huge success with Miss Miller's Feeling for Snow at that point, just to date it. And he was very kind, but he didn't have a job. And by a sort of series of recommendations, I found out about people who are scouts who look for books for foreign English language books for foreign publishers. And I went to work with a woman called Anne-Louise Fisher, who scouts for various foreign publishers across Europe and in America. And it was a completely brilliant introduction to publishing.
How soon into your career did Suite Francaise come across your desk?
It came quite late on. I think it was in 2004 that I acquired it. That was published in France, and I'd been working at Chateau since 1997, so it's quite a long time. Yes. And the irony was that, in a sense, I'd acquired a book from de Noël, the French publisher, which was by Picasso's granddaughter, Marina Picasso, which hadn't been a huge success for us. But through publishing that book, I'd become quite close to the rights director at de Noël, and we sort of knew each other, so that when I came to acquire Suite Francaise, the fact that I'd published that book and we'd worked together sort of benefited me.
Did you have any, it was a very difficult and complicated book to do, wasn't it, for all sorts of reasons, but did you have any sense at the outset of just how enormous a success it would be?
I think I it's good to say in retrospect, but
yes.
I think I remember I was interviewed on the Today programme when I acquired it, and I remember she said something like, do you think this is going to be a bestseller? And I said, well, I just sort of feel it in my stomach. And then I sort of go, what on earth have I just said? What a ridiculous thing to say. But I did at that time sort of feel that. But it was difficult because no one in-house, other than Alison Samuel, who reads French and was the director of Chatham Windows
yes.
at the time, and I had read it, because there weren't people in the sales department whose French was sort of good enough to read a big, long book and make that decision, and we also had to act quite fast. So it was really one of those things where you just had to sort of...
I mean, every once in a while, a translation becomes a bestseller in the UK. Obviously, Suite Francaise, Shadow of the Wind, Miss Miller, which you mentioned. But in general, the Brits are still quite resistant to the idea of translation as compared to, say, the Germans, who buy huge amounts of stuff that we publish. Why do you think it is? It's our past that we always just think if you shout louder, people will understand.
I think we've just got too much good literature in English in some ways. We don't, there is it's very hard. I mean, many people give lots of different explanations, but there is this fact that there's so much writing going on in the English language that it's hard enough to publish all that without getting voices in. And people have had a resistance to reading books. I mean, often translations can be quite clunky. It puts people off.
Yes, I mean, a lot of it is the translation itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
How difficult is it to match the translator with the author, because you need this,
it's quite tricky.
The asterisks, say.
Yeah, I mean, Anthea Bell doing a wonderful job with that. Yeah,
you need someone who's completely simpatico.
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite interesting watching the publishing director of Harvill Secker, who's my new boss because I'm now at Harvill Secker, Liz Foley, who's come from paperback publishing, discovering the joys of doing books in translation, because it's so laborious. You don't just do one contract with the author, you've got to do the contract with the translator. Everything is sort of double the amount of work, and finding the right person is very difficult. I mean, I tend to ask several people to do a sample for me so that I can kind of look at those and decide. In some ways it's probably easier if the author doesn't speak English, because however good their English, unless they're absolutely mother tongue bilingual, they are going to read the English language in a slightly different way to a native English language.
And that's quite a complicated process. You're managing to...
Because I even find, a translation... So I've had terrible problems with translations that I've commissioned here, which we've been licensing to American publishers, where the American publisher hasn't liked the translation because it's somehow too sort of British English, not sufficiently American English. So even within, you know, Americans and British, there are kind of nuances of how you read the language.
Here we are, you know, one of Britain's biggest publishers. Not many would say the easiest environment for publishing translated work, and at a time of huge economic uncertainty. How easy is it to kind of plough your furrow here? I mean, obviously you're empowered to do a number of books, but can it be difficult when it comes to talking to the reps?
I think that you have to. I think you only do translated books if you have a complete passion to do it, because it's not the easiest option ever to convince people, particularly if they can't read the text. I mean, the sales and marketing departments here are intimately involved with everything that we acquire, and so if they can't read a book themselves, it's tricky. If I can't read it, it's really tricky, because we're all relying on a reader's report.
Yes.
And the Italian book that I've bought, I could read it in Italian, and so I could say, look, believe me, trust me, this is wonderful. But if I had just been working off a reader's report, in a sense, my instinct is sort of as good as their instinct.
Yes, I mean, the reader's report, and we just said that obviously if it comes from an editor you know and whose taste you admire, that's fine. But it's still quite difficult because someone is second guessing, or you're both second guessing in a sense, aren't you?
Yes, I mean, it's, you know, you have to have very good relationships with your readers and know your readers' tastes and what they like and don't like, and because they might sort of not like a book for their own personal reasons that you might like. I mean, you need to. So it takes a long time to build up those sorts of relationships.
I mean, obviously there are translation differences with some languages, and presumably it's harder to find translators for some languages. But I mean, in terms of geography, if you like, do some countries go in and out of fashion in terms of we're very interested in Chinese writing, or we're very interested in?
I think. You know, I probably wouldn't have acquired an Afghan novella had 9/11 sort of not thrown Afghanistan kind of into and I think that's probably right, that countries do. And it's interesting watching China at the moment, because I think there is a great deal of interest in books coming out of China, and as a result, there's an awareness that there's a dearth of literary translators, and I can see younger translators coming up to sort of fill that gap.
I mean, are you concerned that in general terms it seems to me from the outside that fewer and fewer people coming into the business now actually know, you know, whether they're working in English as the first language, where fewer of them know how to edit and kind of construct and deconstruct and reconstruct books. And in a sense, people aren't paid to edit; they're paid to shop, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it's something I feel really strongly about. But actually, all the young editors here that I work with really want to be, you know, on the page editors, and they're all really eager to sort of learn that craft.
Right.
And I was very lucky working with Alison Samuel and Jenny Uglo, who are both sort of incredible editors, because you can really only learn. I think it's a sort of mentor-pupil thing. You can really only learn by watching how other people do it, and trial and error, and doing it yourself. And the real problem now is that it's just the amount of effort to just kind of concentrate on the jacket, the sales and marketing, all those things just leaves you very, very little time as an acquiring editor to do that work. It just happens at sort of 3 o'clock in the morning and outside the office. It's very difficult.
What's the book you're most proudest of having published? Is it Suite Francaise or something else?
I think Suite Francaise is I'm pretty proud of that. But I'm really proud of a writer called Ma Jian, who I publish, who is a Chinese writer, and his first book I bought. I mean, I don't think I'd be able to do this now, but I bought it on the basis of a page outline, and he was a sort of dissident Chinese writer who'd come to the West, and he wanted to write the story of this incredible 3-year journey across China that he'd made sort of illegally. When you look on Amazon, people's top 5 books about China, it's always there. Right. And since then I've sort of published other books of his, and this incredible book about Tiananmen Square called Beijing Coma. And in a way is why I want to publish books in translation, is here was this author who nobody in the West had ever been able to read. And now he's writing op-ed pieces for the New York Times, and his works are available in English, and we've got this incredible insight into China through his eyes, and I just think that's what it's all about, really.
Rebecca Carter, Thank you very much.
Thank you.